Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating story about space engineering and some seriously clever problem solving. And it all revolves around one launch that on paper looked totally impossible. I mean, look at this. This is the exact puzzle India's Space Research Organization, or ISRO, was staring down on. And on the surface, right, it just looks like a math problem you can't solve. But the answer? Well, it's just pure ingenuity. All right, so let's dive right in. Let's really get to the core of this thing. A seriously heavy satellite going up against a powerful but, well, a limited rocket. Okay, so the situation is pretty simple, right? You've got ISRO's absolute workhorse of a rocket, the LVM3. Its capacity for this kind of orbit? 4,000 kilograms. That's the limit. And then you have the CMS03 satellite, and it's tipping the scales at 4,410 kilograms. Uh-oh. So that's a 410 kilogram difference. Now, here on Earth, that's already heavy. But when you're talking about space launches, where every single gram is meticulously planned for, 410 kilos, that is a massive, potentially mission-ending challenge. Okay, so you might be wondering, why go to all this trouble? Why is this satellite so important? Well, it turns out this CMS-03 is a whole lot more than just a routine piece of hardware. This thing, the CMS-03, is a dedicated military comms satellite. Its whole job is to give the Indian Navy secure, real-time communication. We're talking voice, video, data, all of it. And that is absolutely critical for how modern navies operate. And really, this isn't just about a simple upgrade. This is a huge strategic mission. It's replacing an old satellite, sure, but it's also linking up the entire naval fleet. Warships, submarines, aircraft, you name it. And maybe most importantly, it means India doesn't have to rely on foreign satellites for this critical national security job. And if you had any doubt about its importance, just look at the price tag. Over $225 million. That's a serious investment from the Ministry of Defense, and it really just highlights how vital it was to get this satellite into orbit, no matter what. Okay, so to really get just how clever ISRO's solution was, we need a quick primer on how these big satellite launches are supposed to work. You know, there's a standard playbook, and it exists for a very good reason. See, trying to launch a satellite directly into its final, super high orbit, that would take a mind-boggling amount of fuel and power. It's just not efficient. So the smarter way to do it is to have the rocket do the initial heavy lifting. It basically drops the satellite off at a temporary parking spot in space called a Geostationary Transfer Orbit, or GTO. From there, the satellite uses its own little engine to finish the journey itself. And if you look at the LVM3's history, you see the pattern loud and clear. Every other big satellite it sent to GTO, like GSAT-19 and GSAT-29, they were all comfortably under that 4,000 kilogram weight limit. This mission? Well, this was something totally new. So you're probably thinking, hey, why not just build a bigger engine or make the rocket lighter? And those are the obvious fixes, right? But the thing is, the most straightforward solutions, like a beefier engine or some new propulsion tech, they just weren't ready to go for this mission. They were working against the clock here. And that brings us right back to the big mystery. You've got a hard weight limit, no easy hardware fixes on the table, so how in the world could ISRO get this satellite where it needed to go? The answer is probably not what you're thinking. All right, so let's get to the big reveal. How did ISRO's team completely flip this problem on its head? This is where things get really, really clever. So the big question, how do you fit a 4,410 kilogram satellite onto a rocket with a 4,000 kilogram limit for that orbit? The answer is you don't. ISRO decided to completely change the rules of the game. Instead of aiming for that standard GTO, they aimed for something different, a lower destination called a Sub-GTO. You can think of it like a lower energy orbital drop-off point that the rocket could actually reach with that heavy satellite. And the numbers right here, they tell the whole story. A standard GTO takes you up to about 36,000 kilometers at its highest point. ISRO's new target, almost 6,000 kilometers lower than that. Just by aiming for this less demanding orbit, the LVM3 rocket suddenly had enough oomph to carry the extra weight. And what's so brilliant about this is that ISRO wasn't exactly reinventing the wheel. They were just refining it in a really clever way. They basically created a custom transfer orbit just for this mission's specific challenges. This wasn't about brute force at all. It was all about finding a smarter, more efficient way to get the job done. But of course, that's only half the story, right? Dropping the satellite off at a lower orbit is great, but now it's got a much longer journey to make on its own. The satellite itself had to pick up the slack. And that required this perfectly timed sequence of engine burns. So first, when it's closest to Earth, that's the perigee, the satellite fires its engine to push its farthest point, the apogee, higher up. Then, once it gets to that new high point, it fires the engine again to raise the low point. It does this over and over, gradually making its orbit more circular at just the right altitude. It's like this incredible cosmic dance, with the satellite having to cover that extra 6,000-kilometer gap all by itself. And this whole thing is a pretty delicate process. You're talking about several days of those orbit-raising burns, followed by 4 or 5 weeks of system checks and getting everything commissioned. Only then, after all that, is the eye in the sky finally ready to start its mission. You know, when you really look at it, this whole mission is just a powerful reminder that when you hit a wall, when you face a hard limit, sometimes the best solution isn't to just throw more power at the problem. Sometimes the most elegant, the most effective solution is to just change the problem you're trying to solve in the first place.